Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran, and today we are going to be taking a look at Ukraine's new rocket artillery system. It's a combination of the new and the old, and we're going to break down just why this thing is annihilating Russian targets. Let's get into it. So, of course, this comes to us from Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Liberty. So definitely a US-backed media outlet, but I think it still illustrates a really interesting point. They are talking about the Bureviy rocket systems, recently upgraded versions of old launchers. So what are we talking about? Well, you can see here, these are old school Soviet-era rocket artillery. So this is rocket artillery, for those of you that don't know, is unguided, almost always unguided, rockets that function on the battlefield like artillery. They launch, they burn their fuel, and then they drop in a parabolic arc onto their target. The math can be a little tricky to get right, but if you can, you have the potential, because unlike an artillery shell that gets all its propellant right when the gun pops and then it follows an arc and goes down, the rocket artillery burns further and further and further. So it has ranges that are considerably above those of standard artillery. So we can see here, he's talking, it is the multiple rocket launch system, and it uses the Soviet era Uragan MLRS, but it's mounted to a Czech Tarta truck, right? So let's see what we can learn about the truck here. First off, you can see that the door is heavily armored. If you ever see the old Uragan systems, in fact, maybe I'll try to pull it up for you guys real quick. MLRS, right? You can see, let's take a look. Right here is the Uragan, and you can see it is a much more old school style of cab, a much older looking system. You can see this armor is very light, and of course it's Soviet made in the 70s, so you know the quality probably leaves a little bit to be desired, right? But you can see here the interior of the truck. It looks like a modern combat vehicle. It looks very similar to the MATVs that we used in Afghanistan. That's ballistic glass all along the sides. You can see it's almost always at a steep angle in the front, and that's to help deflect rounds and shrapnel, so that when they hit, if there is a rocket strike against the cab, that those rounds are going to get, or those rounds, excuse me, it could be rounds, but it more likely is going to be shrapnel. It won't hit straight on, it'll deflect up. Again, when we look at the original Uragan, you can see nothing is deflecting those rounds here. Those rounds are going to hit straight through, straight into the cab. Same thing here. You can see those windows are all straight up and down, meaning there will be zero deflection of rounds, zero deflection of shrapnel. So again, this is just evidence that this is a real combat vehicle that they've upgraded to. Yep, you can see the slants. Now, of course, it's still an old school unguided rocket system. You can see it's using Soviet era rockets, which is really common in this fight, in this war, because the Soviets manufactured so very much equipment. They were prepared to fight the West, and in the Second World War, the Soviet Union struggled with supplies. It's a meme, it's not really true. The idea that Soviet conscripts, one would get issued a rifle, one would get issued rounds, and when one of them died, the other would pick up the rounds and pick up the other's equipment and fight. It's not true. That's ridiculous. You would never send an army into combat with no one having any capacity to return fire. But the idea remains true that the Soviets struggled so much with even basic manufacturing and equipment that they saw it as prudent and appropriate to mass produce munitions and put them in storage in preparation for a future war. And the scale is eye-watering. You're talking millions and millions of individual pieces of equipment. There's something like I think 12 or 25 million AKs, probably close to the same number of Mosin Nagants, and just the count of rounds is incredible. So if you can take a 70s style system from the Soviets that they mass produced, and you can put it on a modern system to make it much more accurate in long range, then you have the potential to make a dangerous weapon that doesn't cost you that much to use. So he talks about the armored cabin, and of course we're seeing the vehicle coming up here, stopping in the middle of a field, preparing to fire. So as we've talked about, and he's going to talk about, the mission is to take out the enemy's personnel, highly mobile targets. But the problem is, when you are a rocket artillery or mobile artillery, you have to be on the move too, because Russia is always looking for you. And they talk about the fact they need to move, set up, fire their rounds, and quickly redeploy and get out of the area, right? There's a reason that they're even giving this interview here under some tree cover, because it's going to be harder for Russian drones to spot them. When they're out in a big open field, it's very easy to get spotted. So camouflage is essential. Again, cover is essential. So you see how when they talk about, oh, this does a little better off-road, we think, oh, well, that's kind of cute. But really, it's a game changer, because if it does better off-road, then it can get into places where, one, the enemy will have a harder time finding them. For example, if a vehicle can't go off-road, you just have to search around roads until you find them. If a vehicle can go anywhere, you have a much larger area you have to search to find them. And you can get into areas that are more tactically advantageous, like we're seeing here, where he's clearly tucked into the woods. Right, they are preparing, doing as much prep work for their fire mission as they can while undercover, to minimize the amount of time they're outside of cover. You can see they haul out, get into the open, because obviously they need space to set up to fire their rockets. They're deploying their outriggers as quick as possible because they need a stable platform. You can see here they are actually doing the calculations and work similar to what you would see in a mortar, because again, these are unguided rockets. So they just need to understand the exact angle that they need to project their rockets. They need to know their exact location in order to make sure those rockets land on target. Now, this is what's crazy, is that you can see here, recently improved rockets can go up to 65 kilometers. For those of you that are in the US, I believe that's around 40 miles. So let's take a quick look at the conflict map, and I'll show you guys just how big a game changer it is to be able to reach 10 versus 40 miles. So here we go, right? Let's say we've got these guys. Oh, let's make this, there we go. Okay, so when we zoom in, right, let's say you are fighting in Bakhmut. There it is. Okay, so 3 kilometers is this right here. We'll zoom out. Let's see if we can get us 10. There we go. 10 kilometers. Okay, you can see it right there. There's 10 kilometers. Bakhmut is maybe 10 kilometers from the front lines. So these rocket artillery probably going to be able to reach deep, probably out to this edge here, right? So all the way to the nearest Russian controlled city, probably their last, one of their major logistics hubs. But if you can get the 60 plus kilometers, you can see from your areas in Bakhmut, you can reach all the way back to headquarters, right? You can be targeting headquarters, you can target major logistics hubs, you can even target areas like Luhansk potentially with these longer range rockets. So you can see that while artillery probably stops around here, rocket artillery is going to be reaching back to here and here. So you understand that this is just how big a game changer these sort of range increases can be. And it's why these units are in considerable danger, right? Because it's so dangerous. They're in the open, there's not that many of them, and they can reach out and touch enemy targets at a level that would be impossible for conventional artillery. You can see here they're set up in a good battery formation and are sending round after round at the enemy. And so that is why rocket artillery is just such a game changer on the battlefield. And it's why we talk so much about the HIMARS system. It's why we talk about all of these systems. Just the ability to reach back and touch the enemy in their back lines where they don't necessarily think they're in danger is tremendously effective. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for joining me on this. As always, if you want to see me break down combat videos that are just too spicy for YouTube, you want to become a member of the Patreon. Thanks, my Lieutenant tier patrons. I'll see you guys in the next one.